If you watch television and movies, the actors and actresses that are stars are almost always fit or thin or both. And that is not necessarily a realistic picture of what the average person looks like or should be like. Our culture really puts a premium on looking like those celebrities. Statistics, not only for the US, but actually around the globe, show that obesity is continuing to rise, and not only rise, but rise tremendously, obesity rates. And every gender in every state, across every age group, every ethnicity, and across all social and economical levels, obesity is on the upswing. And not just an uptick, but on the upswing. So it is a huge health problem. Watch those videos. You know what I'm going to say about content potentially being on the assessments. We generally use a body mass index to determine whether or not a person is obese. If your BMI is 25 or greater, you have an obesity problem. The obesity statistics are particularly high among females, African Americans, Hispanics, and those who are in lower socioeconomic classes. So why is that? There are so many reasons. It's a multifaceted, very complex issue, but let's just look at fat cells. So the amount of fat that is in your body is going to be a reflection of the number and the size of your adipose cells. That's just a fancy way of saying fat cells. You'll remember that. The number of those adipose cells is going to increase most rapidly between sort of late childhood, tweeny years, and early puberty. That really sets the pattern for obesity. And those people who are putting on fat in that time frame will have the greatest risk to become obese and remain obese throughout their lives. Adipose cells are going to increase more rapidly in number in obese kids than in lean kids. And obese children that are in their teen years may already have as many adipose storage cells as do an adult of normal weight, as does an adult of normal weight. So when you lose fat, your adipose cells will shrink. The number of those adipose cells will not. So you can shrink them, but you can't get rid of them. If you have extra adipose cells, you will have a tendency to regain lost weight far more rapidly than those who don't have them. And with that weight gain, the adipose cells will readily, very readily refill, which means that your weight gain is not only faster, but far more efficient. That all leads to the fact that preventing the development of obesity is going to be super critical during childhood, because those adipose cells develop and multiply far more quickly than in adults. The more a child overconsumes, the faster and the more adipose cells will develop. Those cells stay with the child as they enter adulthood and through adulthood, which means that they have significantly increased their chance for developing obesity or maintaining obesity as they age. So let's talk about LPL, which is an enzyme. LPL stands for lipoprotein lipase. It promotes fat storage both in adipose and muscle cells. So if you have high LPL activity, you're going to be able to store lipids much, much more efficiently. Because it is associated with those fat cells, and because obese people have a lot of fat cells, they will of course, understandably, have much more activity of their LPL enzyme. That means it'll be likely that they are going to store more lipids in their cells than leaner people. The activity of LPL is going to be controlled by estrogen in women and testosterone in men, at least in part. In females, adipose cells that are in the breast, hips, and thighs will produce a lot more LPL, which means that fat will be stored in those body areas, giving women a pear shape. In males, they tend to have adipose cells in the abdominal area, which means that they will have more abundant LPL in that abdominal area. That is why men tend to develop what's known as central obesity, kind of apple-shaped, while women tend to be pear-shaped. The differences between the genders are also going to be associated in or with the activity of enzymes which control lipid breakdown in various parts of the body. The lower aspect of the body is less active than the upper body in terms of releasing lipids from storage, which means that women tend to have a much more difficult time losing fat from hips and thighs than from around their chests and abdomen. At least in part, the activity of these enzymes gives some explanation as to why people who lose weight regain it easily. Because after you lose weight, LPL activity will increase. So it kind of acts like a fuel gauge where once you lose weight, there's a signal that's sent off to the cells that produce LPL, which say, you got to make more enzyme to refill that empty tank. In other words, those empty adipose cells. It's pretty easy to regain weight after having lost it. And in fact, very few people are able to keep significant amounts of weight off for longer than a year. So you're battling against these enzymes that want to store fat. And that's one of the reasons why. If you have a lot of adipose cells, the effort and the battle to lose weight is going to be so much harder. So that enzyme activity is going to provide at least one explanation or one part of the explanation for the observation that some of the inner physiological workings seem to set a person's weight or body composition at a fixed point. And the concept behind that is that your body is going to adjust the amount of adipose to restore itself to that body composition set point. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next section, so stay tuned.